How you doing, man? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memory Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the show to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, yesterday was good. I got in a nice run, had a productive work day, recorded the conversation you're going to hear, booked the one I'll record this evening for tomorrow, and caught the finale and the behind-the-scenes special of Schitt's Creek. Nothing more profound than that, but also nothing involving dread and anxiety, so I'll take it. So let's get to today's guest. Michael Tisserand is joining me this time from New Orleans. Michael's the author of Crazy, the fantastic biography of George Harriman, the cartoonist who created Crazy Cat. And when I say crazy, that's with a K. And cat. A few weeks ago, Michael posted the news on Twitter that his wife, a doctor, had tested positive for coronavirus. So I was not going to hit him up about this while he had heavy stuff to deal with. Following him on Twitter, the situation didn't seem to get terrible. So a few days ago, he mentioned that she was past it and had returned to work. So I figured, okay, it's safe. Why don't I hit him up? And here we are. Now, as caveats go, not a ton. His levels were a little high, but, I've got to deal with everybody having a different microphone and, again, nothing's optimal, but if this is the worst I have to deal with, I have it off pretty easy. Here's me and Michael. So how are you coping? And how is your wife coping, more importantly?
Are we recording now? Is this?
We are.
This is
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I will not hurl the expletives.
Feel free. I always tell people.
Quite the energy.
Nobody's listening.
First of all, it's good to hear you. I enjoyed seeing you better when you were in. I'm in the same room that we hung out in when you visited here.
I know.
My wife Tammy, I think you know, did test positive for COVID-19. She got through it. I was. Not surprisingly, very nervous, maybe even more nervous than she was, just because I know that even though she had mild symptoms, those can become not mild symptoms. And but she did get through it, and she is symptom-free now, except she has not regained her sense of taste or smell. And if you live in New Orleans, you have no sense of taste. That's a particularly horrible handicap to have.
On the plus side, I was going to say it's gallows humor, but she may be the only person to contract COVID in New Orleans and not, end up in dire circumstance.
Well, it does. Yeah, we do have a really bad. Well, as in New York and Detroit and other places, it's not an easy place to be right now. So we're here. Yeah. Both of our kids have joined us, our college kids. So they are now taking their online courses. I spent the last 2 weeks kind of being a half-assed nursemaid to Tammy and just kind of trying to figure out the new normal. And this week is my effort to try to become more productive, which this is talking with you is a good start, Gil. Kind of reaches outside these four walls into the larger conversations that I like being a part of. So it's good to talk to you, Gil. I'm glad you're doing this,
good.
By the way. Glad you're doing these pieces here.
Thanks, man. It's as much for me as it is for the guests and the audience and all that, because I'm without the complication of the virus itself. Amy and I are also sequestered here in northern New Jersey. We don't get out. I don't have friends per se. I have podcast guests.
Right.
So, being able to just reach out and have conversations and see how other people are doing.
Well, it ain't love, but it'll do till the real thing comes around, right?
Nice. So your wife's a doctor?
She's a pediatrician. Also? So she's not really
okay.
on the front line, but she's maybe one trench behind the front line. So she's,
gotcha.
Seeing kids and seeing their families, and doesn't know she contracted it somewhere in the line of duty.
I'm sure.
But really, she's right up there with, the grocery store checkout people and all the people that we've been taking for granted, but now are risking their health to keep some kind of machinery rolling here for us. So she's so that is. I mean, I gotta say, I can really sequester myself in a pretty profound way. Like you were saying, I can live a lot of my life online, and then I can put my hazmat suit on and go get groceries and come back again and, walk around the neighborhood. But living with Tammy just means that I'm living with someone who is not going to be doing that, who will be out there dealing with the public, including sick people. And that's just what we signed up for. So here we are.
Did you have any sort of venting / decompression art consumption while helping her through this process? And now that she's pretty much through this process, what is giving you some sort of art solace, I guess?
Yeah. You know what? I almost hate to say this because it sounds so on brand.
Don't say Tiger King. Don't say Tiger King. Don't say Tiger King.
No, Tiger T, not Tiger King. I actually have been reading a lot of Crazy Cat comics with a different eye, and that's almost more embarrassing than saying Tiger King. I couldn't.
I'm sure Karasik and Newgarden are finding solace in Nancy, so that's okay.
Exactly. Well, I try to I ask myself. W, W, K, and N, D. What would Karasek and Newgarden do every morning? Right. No, and finding new, finding new content, like I always do when I read Crazy Cat. But now I've been, first of all, I mean, I was curious, just like I think you saw possibly Jared Gardner's essay about Spanish flu comics that he recently published. A couple weeks ago, I was wondering if Crazy Cat ever dealt with the Spanish flu, and found a beautiful full-page comic about Crazy and Ignatz getting Spanish flu in 1918. So I sent it to Art Spiegelman, and since he's sequestered up with his daughter, who's with the Paris Review, that comic ended up in the Paris Review. So both my name and George Herriman's name got in the Paris Review for the first time. But more important, it was sharing his humorous view and sense of history, in looking at that view of whatever it was called, Spanish flu, Kansas flu, it should have been called, right? But Spanish flu,
right?
And then since then, I was talking with my friend Paul Toomey, who did that great book Screwball, and we were just kind of talking about all of the scenes of death that you see in Crazy Cat. And sort of not scenes, I guess, but meditations on death and mortality and fate, especially in that 1916, 1917, 1918, and especially in the dailies. The dailies always seem to, sort of be Harriman's his version of tweeting, I guess. It's the thing that he puts out the quickest, that seems like closest to his, it seems rawest at his most raw sometimes, and for him, of course, it's incredibly refined rawness. But all these scenes of Crazy and Ignatz discussing, what happens at the end of the line, or discussing the role that fate plays in our lives. And of course, in addition to an epidemic at that time, World War I was happening at that time, so it was coming from both sides on Crazy Cat. And then that led me to look again at this comic that he did after his beloved daughter, Bobby Harriman, died, which I did sort of turn into a... Sorry about this.
No worries.
That's my phone. Which I did turn into kind of a Twitter thread, sort of a half-ass attempt to be a Jeet here of the Twitter thread. He's kind of the master of the forum. So I kind of broke down this comic he did, and which I think is the reason why I wanted to share that is in the midst of rage and anger, which I seem to have more than my share of these days, and they kind of light on whatever senator or president might be saying at any given moment. This comic that he did really went toward grief and even faith in dealing with tragic loss. And it's of Crazy Cat finding, this was after his daughter died, who had was in bad health and had multiple surgeries throughout her life. And Crazy Cat finds a baby star that is falling from the sky and creates a little hot air balloon out of a pillowcase and sends it back up again, and sends it back home. And then a note comes down, thanking Crazy Cat, and says, that the baby star is back home again. And this came out 3 weeks after his daughter died. So you can imagine he sat down and did this comic in the middle of grief. So I've been thinking of going to that. And also I'm working on helping out. Last fall, I was really fortunate enough to spend a day with Jules Feiffer and did a filmed interview, but did about 3 to 4 hours of filmed interview with him. And I turned part of that into a piece for the Daily Beast, specifically looking at his Nixon cartoons and how they can be read in our age now. Reading Pfeiffer on Nixon in the age of Trump. And but now it was a festival called the New Orleans Improvisation Conference or Festival that got me to go up there to interview him and create this film. And we're going to be putting that online as soon as it gets done. So it's been fun to help out with that, because that's another voice that is a very different type of voice in many ways, but another voice that I'm really enjoying hearing. His cartoons, they're very spare and they only show up about once a month, but his 91-year-old self is bringing himself to the drawing table and creating these great political cartoons for the tablet website these days. So I've been enjoying those also.
It was the, I would say top 3, top 4 moments in my podcast history was not just getting to sit down with him and doing that, with Tom Spurgeon, who was visiting at the time. The two of us drove out to Long Island to sit down with Jules. But the whole experience of meeting Jules a month or so earlier at SPX, where Drew Friedman shoved me into the green room at the con and just said, "Go get yourself a bagel. You said you didn't have any breakfast yet." Shoves me into a room that solely has the organizer of SPX, Linda Barry, Jules Feiffer, and Tom Tomorrow. And I was just like, yeah, Drew said I should go get a bagel over here. I just hid in a corner. Jules came right over and asked, wanted to introduce and see who I was. And I pitched him on the spot by using I recorded one with Bruce J. Friedman and figured that was a good in, which Drew said was a good idea because, I think he said Jules had the great line of, "I love Bruce. Don't know about his son though." And,
those pinch me, I'm really doing this, I'm really here moments certainly are my greatest reward for this kind of work. I went in, it was about a year after Katrina. I was in Chicago, living there for a couple of years, and went to the Hideout Bar for one of the Best American Comics. It was a reading and a party to celebrate the newest one, which Harvey Pekar was the guest editor on. And I had worked with Harvey Pekar when I was an editor at Gambit, and I had been in some communication after Katrina. He'd had we had a couple funny Pekar-esque conversations, and so I went in to see him, and I walked in, and there's Harvey Pekar sitting at a table. There's Chris Ware sitting at a bar, and there's Linda Barry bartending. It was like that James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, Nighthawk the Diner thing, only with our favorite cartoonists.
Yeah, that when you actually see like the Pantheon in person, that's it's nice that so many guys survived, so long that we got that sort of continuity, seeing some of the older ones too.
And you turn to them for their longevity and sense of perspective. I don't know about you, but I can get really caught up in a moment like this, and I can get really irate about the smallest things. And someone like Pfeiffer brings 91 years of experience to this. And people like Linda and Chris are not as aged as Pfeiffer, but yet somehow they bring the long view as artists to the situation also that we all lean on.
Well, that's been my podcast practice throughout. I mean, you may notice the lack of guests under the age of 40. I generally up towards 60 and older is generally my demo, which is a thing for me, I guess. But I wrote Chris a couple of days ago because he's friends with one of the artists I just posted, a pal named Dmitry Samarov. So I just wanted to let Chris know that the Dmitry episode was up, and he sent a really nice note back about how they're coping and dealing with things. I didn't pitch him on doing one of these outside of like the initial email. I figured, being a nudge. But it was just, I told him I enjoyed that one pager he had in the New Yorker and the cover, and we just kind of had a little, this is where we all are. Hopefully we'll have a chance to get together in person sometime soon.
Who knows where? But, who knows when?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any conception of what normal would look like after this?
Normal.
Do you see any return to what things were?
Normal is just a Martin Mull album. That was. I don't want to belabor the comparison because there are so many important differences, but certainly that was a question that people would ask, after Katrina as well. And, I was in New Orleans and went through that experience. I wasn't wading hip deep in water, but, we went through our portion of it, of the experience in our own way. And it was a time when everything's upended and you don't really know where it's going to land. So no, I have no idea, to be honest. And that's what I'm trying to get more comfortable with. Certainly I have hopes. I have hopes that my son, who's a college freshman, will be able to return to his, highly anticipated college years next fall, perhaps. But I have hopes that my little movie theaters that are part of my, that I like to ride my bike to for the Kirk Douglas Festival that was going on this past month, a couple miles away. I hope I'll be able to go back to those pleasures again because they were pleasures. But I don't know. Probably the one thing that's happened in New Orleans here is one of our great jazz musicians, Ellis Marsalis, the father of Wynton and Branford and Delfio and Jason Marsalis. He passed away, and the thought that he passed away in New Orleans and we could not meet for a jazz funeral to go out on the streets with music and mourning and celebration. This thing that jazz funeral brings, this moment of mourning and celebration somehow being two sides of the same coin was really something. And then another person died of COVID-19, as Ellis Marsalis appears to have done as well. It wasn't tested, but appears to have done. Another person died who is an activist. He lived a half a block away from me. And he was involved in Freedom Summer, and he was involved in a lot of civil rights and working people rights campaigns all of his life. Really inspiring person. And after he died, people that his friends got together and formed an automobile procession to go up our street to basically bring comfort to his widow. So she sat in a chair in front of her house, and people had signs, and a couple of them were playing, New Orleans brass band music from the cars as they were passing, and a minister stood across the street singing, "Victory is Ours" and some other civil rights anthems. And I talked to that minister afterwards, and said I thought it was really incredible what he did, and he said, these are new times, and it's going to call for new rituals. Yeah. So that's I think the wisest and smartest thing I've heard in the last few weeks.
It's just got to be so tough, especially for New Orleans, where that sense of community, matters. Where it's so much part of the day to day. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And so a lot of the muscles we learned in Katrina about rebuilding community, they don't really work for us now, because that was all about coming together and holding each other really hard. And and now we have to do it in a different way. So it is happening for us, like it's happening for everybody else. Some kind of virtual version of that. I have to give a shout out outside of New Orleans. You asked about what art was getting me through. So there are a lot of musicians in New Orleans, and if people go to the WWOZ community radio station, they'll see all these great performances listed that online streaming, Facebook, YouTube channel performances that New Orleans musicians are doing, and some of them have been fantastic, and I recommend that. And also Ben Modell, his comedy shows, his silent comedy parties, live music parties on Sunday afternoon, they've been my highlight of the weekend. I look forward to them to see what he has
he's
to
one
offer.
of the early people to commit to doing this, and I haven't followed up with him. I really have to put him on. He is sneakily one of my all-time favorite episodes of this show, because I had no idea what to expect. It was a conversation that seems dry on the face of it, but it was so absolutely fascinating to me. Yeah. The nature of technology and entertainment and the transitoriness of reputation and everything, his interaction with the artwork and the audience in the moment when he's doing this stuff. There's so much there. And I was like, I did not expect any of that to come out of this conversation, but I was so happy that David Leopold was the guy who connected us.
Right.
Which was also the great line of, "You need to record with my friend Ben. He plays accompaniment to silent movies." This was literally an hour or so after meeting me, and I thought, how do you know me that well? That's exactly who I want to sit down and talk with, not being facetious in the slightest. So yeah, I'll have to follow up with him about this for sure.
Yeah, he's on his third or his fourth, and right now I think he's still like screening it on his wall and playing music and giving some stories about some of the performers. And I've been introduced to comic actors that I confess I did not know the names of. So it's been a little bit of a masterclass, as well as a serious chance to laugh.
Good. Yeah, I'll pursue with him for sure. Now, do you have any, knowing the open-endedness of this whole thing, longer-term projects, either reading, writing, and anything that you're looking at in terms of if I'm going to be sitting in the house for another month or two, this is what I should probably get to?
Well, most of my projects aren't totally affected by this change, because most of what I'm doing is not interview-based at this point. I do have a revised proposal that I can't talk about yet, but it is sitting on an editor's desk, and I hope that it's going to turn into something. Next time we talk, either casually or for your podcast, I hope to be able to tell you about that. One thing I can talk about that is proceeding is the George Harriman documentary. There's a terrific filmmaker named Jonathan Hawk, that optioned my book for a documentary. And just about 2 months ago, it's been sitting, like, many are optioned, few are filmed, right? And so I didn't know if anything would happen there. But he did bring me in as a producer and a consultant. And Walter Mosley, the great mystery writer, is also involved with it as a producer. He's a friend of Jonathan's, and I really like Jonathan's work. First of all, most of it's sports related, but it's really stories about human beings who happen to play sports, and they're a terrific set of films. And just in talking about Crazy Cat and why he liked the story, I felt a lot of kinship with him and our visions. And the one thing I told him, this is about a year ago, is maybe a year and a half ago, even if you don't have funding, if you can at all, swing the money, we should go to Arizona and talk with Dee Cox, who's George Harriman's granddaughter, and she was in great health. But she's in her 80s, and we should go talk to her now. And she was welcoming. She's become a friend. I'd stayed at her house when I come to Arizona. We've had some terrific adventures and wonderful times. And Jonathan showed up with a total film crew and spent a good amount of time with Dee. I don't know if you ever worked with a filmmaker, but I found, as someone who likes to walk in with, maybe a tape recorder, a phone, and a notebook, and be really out of the way, filmmakers have a tough job because they walk in with big, heavy boots and sound equipment and things like that. And I thought Jonathan was really, really, really respectful in that interview. And I was very sad to find out in December, this past December, Dee did pass away. And the kind of the last, one of the last people that really spent time with George Harriman. And it's a huge loss to her family, of course, first of all. And to me, I really liked her a lot and really valued the friendship that we had over this project. And I'm very grateful that we do have a really in-depth filmed interview with her. So, but Jonathan, it's his film. I feel like the book was really my statement, and I'm letting, even though I'm involved in helping out with Jonathan, it's his film. And he reports over the last few months that things are moving forward with funding in really exciting ways. And we actually had a couple interviews set up in New York that we had to cancel because of COVID. But it looks as if it's moving forward. So it's kind of out of my hands. And I can't guarantee anything, as we can't guarantee anything, but it looks like that will be moving forward this year.
Cool. Yeah. If it ends up going into any sort of, Indiegogo, Kickstarter, whatever, to do bridge funding or something, let me know. If it's a way of getting word out about it, and ways of trying to gin up interest.
Yeah, I'll do that. That'd be my style. I don't think it's Jonathan's style. He's working other sources, but
yeah, I figure that's usually the case. But if it ever turns into that, we're here for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll let you know if there's more good news about that, because I think. We talked about artists who bring perspective, and you think of what Harriman lived through and his family lived through, not just pandemics, but not just a pandemic, but Crazy Cat was born out of this highly racialized prize fight in 1910, in which there were, the story. So, he really turned tragedy into something really profound. So I would be very happy actually I haven't spent a lot of time really writing about Crazy Cat and Harriman lately, but I've got a couple essays in mind now, and that seems to be where my mind is.
Awesome. Last question. New Orleans restaurant, that would be this is the first place I'm going to once we're allowed to go out for a meal.
Yeah, let's go to Bryson's.
What would be your choice?
Yeah, let's go to Bryson's. Let's go.
Yeah?
Yeah, Bryson's. It's run by a guy named Frank Bryson. He worked under Paul Prudhomme. In 1983, I washed dishes at K. Paul's. I knew Frank then. So I've known him for 40 years, and it's at a kind of uptown Riverbend cottage home, really casual and friendly, and the most amazing food, the best butternut squash bisque, and the most amazing pecan pie with kind of a caramel glaze over it. Incredible seafood as well. And he did a little bit of takeout for the first week before shutting down entirely. And the last day of that takeout, I showed up, and an old school friend of his was sitting in the front while we were waiting in line for the food, playing banjo and singing John Prine's "That's the Way the World Goes Round." And so that was the closing of Bryson's, and I can't wait to get back for the opening of Bryson's. And I think we should go.
I am looking at the website and the menu right now, and I'm ready.
You're in?
when
Okay,
we
good.
get down there next. Yeah.
All right.
Ostensibly, if the future permits it, Christmas time we'll be down visiting Amy's family, but who knows what the future has. We will get down there, and you and I are going to eat.
Good.
So,
good. I look forward to that.
That's awesome.
I'll make the reservations. Just let me know when.
Okay. Will do. So we'll talk soon. Thanks so much, Michael.
Thanks. Keep up this good work, Gil.
That was Michael Tisserand. Go check out Crazy, with a K, Michael's wonderful biography of George Harriman. It's one of my favorite bios ever. Michael's website is michaeltisserandauthor.com, all one word. Michael and author are spelled the customary way. Tisserand is Tisserand. Michael Tisserand Author is also his Facebook page. He's on Twitter as M_Tisserand and Instagram as Michael Tisserand, all one word. Give him a follow. He does good work. We'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in. If it works out, it's going to be with Ben Modell, the guy who Michael and I talk about in this episode. If you want to send me a little update to read on the air or have something you want to share with the listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at groth18@gmail.com. You can find the contact info at our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. And if you go to the latter site, there is a link to the COVID-19 sessions where I've collected all of these daily podcasts. If you're interested in the setup that I'm using for these remote recordings, it's Zencastr, Zencastr.com that I use so that both the guest and I can record our side of the conversation, then it uploads to the cloud where I get access to both files. That is spelled Zencastr, so no final E. The service costs $20 a month, but my Patreon supporters more than cover it, especially since I'm not spending money anymore on parking, tolls, subways, coffee, etc. for those in-person episodes I was doing. If you can spare any money, don't give it to me. Go find the Patreons and other crowdfunding models. That's Kickstarters, Indiegogos, tip jars, GoFundMes, whatever, for the artists, writers, and other people in need. Show them some support. Buy gift cards from your favorite bookstore or other small business. Do what you can to help others. I'm Gil Roth. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, 2020, and this was a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories show. Thanks so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.